course, humans, we've always had stories of our own origins and so on. And they're beautiful stories. And they tell our nature and our history in ways that the scientific story can't do. But the neat thing about the scientific view is that there's consensus now among pretty much all scientists around a single story of our emergence out of some mysterious singularity, which is another word for God, I guess, or the great mystery. And all of matter energy seems to have mysteriously emerged from that point, immediately giving rise to an expanding universe. And so somehow, and we know the stages and we know the various thresholds that have been crossed from the first condensation of the first particles out of the infinite sea of quantum energy. That happens very, very soon. And right after that, I mean, light suffuses the whole cosmos, galaxies start to form. And within the billions and billions of galaxies, including our own Milky Way, which is the only one that we have any direct acquaintance with, billions of suns. And around so many of these suns, planets, we now know, this is another fascinating thing about our time, within the last few years, we have the first empirical evidence that there actually are other planets orbiting other suns like our own. In fact, there are billions of these planets just in our own galaxy that are quite possibly, many of which have life, and undoubtedly some of which have evolved to have self-conscious life much like our own. So this is what's, the mystery is that infinite energy and hydrogen atoms will spontaneously organize, come together to form balls of molten rock, which is what our planet was 4.6 billion years ago. And somehow, when it cools enough, life emerges. Right? So these are the thresholds: particles, light, galaxies, life. And at a certain point, that life complexifies and expands in its diversity, at least under the right conditions, to give rise to, in our case, particularly mammals, and mammals with opposable thumbs and big enough brains, and the ability to speak and eventually form symbols. So this is another major threshold, is the symbol formation. Then there's the beginning of history. So if you were to place this along the line of 14 billion years ago, and if that line were, let's say, around 2 miles long, everything that we call history from the very earliest records would be just the last couple of centimeters on that 2 mile walk. Right? So everything that we're familiar with is so recent. And yet it seems that everything that preceded it is a kind of necessary preparation that allows for this flowering of consciousness. That consciousness is what makes possible not only the knowledge that we have gained. Of course, we've lost all kinds of knowledge and languages, cultural knowledge, but we have this scientific story, at least now, that is emerging, that's unparalleled. And we also have the great religious and spiritual traditions that have brought us teachings of wisdom and love and compassion. So all of that we could think of as is a very, very late flowering and fruit that happens in, cosmologically speaking, the very last milliseconds of this billion-year process. So, this is where we are, at least on this planet. And as you say, it's unparalleled, it's paradoxical, and maybe I'll just leave it at that for a moment.